In this demo, I'm going to show you some of the interesting things that you can understand by looking at the very simple invocation samples that show in the XML Feature Pack sample application. Three areas that I definitely wanted to go over was the ability to do interpreted versus compiled versus precompiled of all the XML programming models. Schema Awareness, which is one of the major new functions that's showing up in this refresh of the XML Feature Pack beta, and collections. I might show a few more that have shown up to round out our XSLT 2.0 functionality as well. But let me start out with the ability to do compilation of XML artifacts. So if you look at these simple XPath examples, you are going to see there's many more samples in here, but the three I'm going to focus on at this point are the first sample, simple XPath invocation, the sample number 5 running in compiled mode, and sample number 6 running in precompiled mode. You can see actually that each one of these samples is doing the exact same thing. It's taking a very simple names XML file and it's looking in the document for the first name and looking for the last name of the first name, and it's returning the value doe. So how did we implement these? The first two are nothing more than simple Java code. So you can see that when they execute, they take the input file and they take the XPath string that was passed in. We create a new factory, we prepare the XPath, we get a source of the input file, we execute it, and we write out the value that comes back, in this case doe. What's different about a compiled simple XPath? So this is new functionality that's showing up in this refresh. The difference is now I can do the set use compiler, and you can see that I'm telling it when I prepare the XPath to use the compiler. And what it's actually doing is behind the scenes, it's actually compiling Java bytecode that is the most efficient way of executing that XPath instead of interpreting it, which is what many XPath processors would do. So it's a performance optimization. The interesting thing here is you can see that each time it's executing, it's going to compile this XPath, and that's not much faster than running it interpreted because you have the performance problem of doing the compilation. As you'll see in the samples, you can see that you can move that out to a static initialization because this API and this runtime make those threads safe. It's perfectly safe to initialize them once and re-execute them many times in a server environment. So in the compilation case, you can make that very performant. The interesting thing is still on the first execution, you're going to need to suffer the compile time. And that's where precompile comes in. And you'll see in this case, instead, I do something very interesting. So what I do is I create a new instance of the factory, and now instead of setting the compiler to true and doing a prepare, I actually get the compilation factory from the main factory, and I do a load XPath, and you can see that I'm passing in a class name and a package name that's passed in to this argument, and I'll show you how that class gets written in a second. But then I do the exact same thing. Once I have that XPath executable, I go ahead and execute it and write the data out again, the last name being doe. So how do I get this executable, this class that I'm loading as an XPath? The way you get that is there is now a tool that ships as part of the feature pack. There's actually a tool for compile XPath, compile XSLT, and compile XQuery for all three supported languages. In this case, I'll show you compile XPath, and you can see that tool, you pass it what class name you want to put it in this case, simple XPath. I want to just put it in a temporary directory, and I want to put it in the com IBM XML samples compiled artifacts package. I'm going to pass it a text file that has the XPath in question, and I'm going to go ahead and compile that. Once that is compiled, you'll see if I look under the temp directory and I look under com, you'll see that it creates quite a bit of Java classes that represent the compiled XPath that needs to be executed. And going back to the source code, I load that class and package name. If I look at the simple example, you can see that I'm passing it the package name that I used when I did the compilation and the class name that I'm passing that I used when I did the compilation. And you can see that I load that in and the class comes in. It's very similar to the at runtime compile call that I did by setting the compiler to true and doing the prepare. But now the compilation cost isn't ever incurred by the application server. You can actually do this as part of your build and package this with your application. So I take those classes, I put it into my application right alongside this Java class file as well, and now I can get the best performance out of my execution. You can see you can run the tool that ships with the feature pack, or you can wrap the exact same Java class into an AMP build file, for example. Here's where I put it into our AMP build file, and you can see that I'm putting it into the standard WebInf classes and bundling it in. You can see how to run it within AMP. So to summarize, the very simple way of invoking an XPath, or this is true for XSLT and XQuery as well, is you just execute it. The slightly more complicated way, and this is for cases where the XPath might not exist until runtime, but you know you're going to use it over and over again. In that case, we do the set compiler true and we do the prepare, and that's running in compiled mode. Or in the case which is fairly common where you know at build time you run in precompiled mode and you run this tool to create the class files and you just load them. And this will get you the best performance. So the next part of the simple invocation samples I wanted to show you were the schema aware simple invocations sample. So that's another new feature that's showing up in this refresh of the XML feature pack, is the ability to look at schema awareness. So what you'll see is if you look at the samples, there are many samples on XSLT 2.0 as we round out the functionality of XSLT 2.0. So if you go to around sample 22, you'll start to see some of the schema awareness validation scenarios within the sample. And let's start with the input validation. So if you look at the input validation, we start to use a new data file, sales with namespace, and we have an XML schema file that defines whether that data file is valid or not. If you look at the schema, it basically defines a sales type and a transaction type, and it's bounding some of the data elements that are within that based on schema information. So the first is that any quantity should never be negative, and that any product should always start with a product ID that is greater than 100. That allows us to define a valid sales transaction sheet where you can see that the first product starts with product ID of 101 greater than 100 and a quantity of 40, which isn't negative. And it also allows us to create invalid documents and define them as invalid. So you can see that this product ID is not higher than 100 and the quantity is -1. So if in any case where you would validate the first, it should be valid. If you validate the second, it should be invalid. So let's look at how we validate the input. So you can see we load in a little different than before. So now when we create the factory, we tell the factory to validate input documents, and we register the schema that we just showed, the sales with namespace XSD. So then we do the transformation, and if you look at the transformation as we defined it, it looks at the document node and looks to see if by the time the transformation runs, that is it's of sales type. And if it's a sales type, it just prints out the first transaction. What's also interesting is if it doesn't come through as a sales type, that means that the document loaded, but it was not valid and did not have a sales type as its document node. You can see that we print a message that says the input document wasn't valid.